let's start with Donald Trump, who sat down with Kristen Walker. I do not, for the life of me, I do not understand why Donald Trump still does interviews with these people. I don't get it. It's like isn't your whole thing that you broke this media apparatus? Why? It just, look, whatever. He could talk to whoever he wants to. People sure do enjoy him owning the journalists and stuff like that. I just don't, when it seems like you're breathing life back into your enemy institution that you already crushed. Why go give them a thing that's going to be big ratings? That is beyond me. There was one moment in the conversation that's really been going viral. It is Donald Trump discussing the ramifications of his tariff policy. And so here, let's play it and then respond. I was personally myself a little bit surprised that he took this line, but let's watch.
Said this week got a lot of attention. You were at your cabinet meeting. You said, quote, I'm going to quote what you said, maybe the children will have $2 instead of $30.
Yeah.
And maybe the $2 will cost a couple of bucks more than they would normally. Are you saying that your tariffs will cause some prices to go up?
No, I think the tariffs are going to be great for us because it's going to make us rich.
But you said some dolls are going to cost more. Isn't that an acknowledgement that some prices will go up?
I don't think a beautiful baby girl that's 11 years old needs to have $30. I think they can have $3 or $4 because what we were doing with China was just unbelievable. We had a trade deficit of hundreds of billions of dollars with China.
When you say they could have $3 instead of $30, are you saying Americans could see empty store shelves?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying they don't need to have $30. They can have $3. They don't need to have 250 pencils. They can have 5.
You said this week got a lot of.
All right. So this was the comment from Donald Trump that is drawing a lot of scrutiny. And I got to say here, Rob, I think we've tried our best to do a good job here of just like calling balls and strikes. So like, I will be the first one to give Donald Trump credit when he does something good. I'll be the first one to criticize him when I think he does something wrong. I'll be the first one to defend him when I think he's being unfairly, villainized by the corporate media or whatever. This is retarded bullshit. This is just ridiculous. It's ridiculous on so many goddamn levels. First of all, it's like, you can't have it both ways, dude. You can't say that like, maybe you only need $2, you don't need $500 or whatever. But then also go, oh no, but it's not going to raise prices at all. It's like, so which one are you talking about here? I also, by the way, I find this in a weird way to be kind of an interesting topic. This is something that I've talked a lot about with like close friends and family members about just how we get our kids too much stuff these days. And like, I do feel like my house is just like covered in toys. And I was like, maybe in some way, like if my kids had less toys, they'd appreciate the ones they have more, something like that. But that's a very different conversation than a conversation about a government policy that makes it more expensive to get your kids toys. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, Rob, but I just, for a few reasons, I find this to be totally indefensible. And okay, here's one of the major ones. Well, a couple of them. I mean, obviously, the point that we've made a million times that you could keep making, he could just sit here and assert that the tariffs are going to make us rich. Again, it's like, well, which one is it? Are we going to be getting more dolls or less dolls? Like what are you talking about here? But if you're saying the tariffs are going to make us rich, you got a whole lot of problems there. Like why? Okay, then like. Why wouldn't a full blockade make us rich? Why do we trade with the world at all then? Why don't we get super rich and just never trade with the world? Why don't we make ourselves, if the principle applies, let's stop trading between the states, right? Like let the states get real. Let's just stop trading between households. Just you produce everything in your household. If this principle is true and it makes you rich to stop trading with others, I don't see what the limiting factor there is. But regardless of that, one of the, like when I'm having these thoughts and these conversations with friends and family of mine, I also recognize that I'm not in the financial position that everybody's in. many people are not in the financial position I'm in. And there's lots of good data on this, but if you look at the amount, like since the lockdowns and the price inflation that followed the insane monetary policy of 2020, 2021, credit card debt skyrocketed. Like a lot of families are buying those dolls on the credit card. Also, there are families that the difference won't be having $30 or having two. There's families that currently have two that the answer will be have zero, which maybe would have been a better question, for Kristen Walker to ask. Like, how about that? How about if it's the difference between now your kid doesn't get to play with a doll? The other thing, and I'm sorry, but there is a good argument that maybe we give our kids too many toys. Maybe my house is filled with too much cheap toys that were made in China. And maybe in general, kids would appreciate things more if they just had, we do have for people, at least in the situation, like a certain amount of abundance. We have more than we really need. And there is to some degree, like a minimalist argument for why, you don't want to have too much more than you actually need. Of all of the people in the history of the world who have ever existed, I don't know that there's one human being who is worse equipped to be the one making that argument than Donald fucking Trump. I mean, I'm sorry, Rob. That is goddamn insane. It is insane to spend your entire adult life being the poster child of capitalist excess, to the point that I'm going to take a shit on a gold-plated toilet. I'm going to live in you know what I'm saying? It's just for Donald Trump to be the one making the argument that people, again, it's just, I'm sorry. I'm somebody who's driven by principles and logic, and just explain this to me. Then if this is what you're saying, then wasn't price inflation actually a good thing? Wasn't Joe Biden's economy actually good? I mean, it forced you probably to get less things, Maybe that's nice. Maybe you don't need all that stuff. Maybe you should have less stuff. I don't know, dude. I mean, this is just, to me, to try to sell this and not spin it as look, this is the cost. I'm going to be honest with you. These are the negatives that are associated with this policy, but here's what I think the benefits are. But to spin this as this is a benefit, and of all people, for Donald Trump to be spinning it, it's I'm sorry. I just can't defend this. This is too ridiculous. What are your thoughts? Well,
I think that's a very funny observation. I hadn't even thought about that, of Trump preaching people on that they don't need to consume in excess. My thought was a little bit different, that, Trump picked a very good example here, because when he says, hey, your kid will have 3 toys instead of 30, I think we can all go, oh yeah, if my kid needs to have less toys and there's an American job for him to have the less toys, maybe that's a worthwhile trade-off. And so he picked a very good example for selling it. She asked a great first question. She didn't ask the right follow-up question, which is, are you acknowledging that prices are going to go up? Because now, what happens if prices are going up on things that aren't toys? What if we're talking about not being able to buy a washer and dryer? What if we're talking about not being able to buy clothes? And then how much central planning do we want in our government? Where are we going to figure out what goods are considered excess goods that the government can decide we're going to put a tariffs on those? And then there are going to be other favored industries that don't have the tariffs because the government can understand, hey, you being able to consume this, such as a car, you need a car to get to work.
Right. And maybe we could break them down by essential and non-essential goods, Rob.
Which already is kind of happening. I read this article. Firstly, is for car manufacturers, the increase in cost, I think, was expected to be $6,000. And so Trump temporarily has halted the tariffs on some base items, such as steel. And so because General Motors was able to lobby the government and that it would affect their business, they're now preferred industry. What about every small business owner that can't actually get Donald Trump's ear and explain, hey, you didn't give me enough notice on this. You're ruining my business. I don't have enough time to make these adjustments. Yep. And so to me, part of the tariff just speaks to, do you want central planning in the economy? Do you want the president to be able to say, these are goods that you should not have in excess, so we're going to tariff them. These are important goods, or these are favored industries. There's not going to be a tariff on it. And then what's going to be the fallout from, the market versus central planning? This is a president saying, hey, I don't think it's important for you to be able to consume blank amount of this item. Now, the two that he wants to tell you about is pencils and dolls. But what other items are you going to see price increases on? Are those ones that will be vastly more detrimental to your lifestyle? And then what? Does he make an adjustment down the line? Did he not foresee it?
Yeah.
What does those adjustment periods look like? This is all just the stupidity of central planning.